They said he was the prince. And me? Just the girl who scrubbed his plates, folded his shirts, fetched his juice like a servant. My stepmother stood in the kitchen that night, lips curled like the queen of something rotten. "He's the prince," she said. "You? Clean for him." I didn't answer. I didn't bow. And for that, my father took off his belt. I walked out of that house with one bruised arm, one wrinkled dollar, and a silence so loud it cracked my ribs. They thought I'd disappear, another broken girl who kept quiet. But what they never saw coming was what happened next. Because the girl they hit didn't vanish. She became someone who would make the whole town stop and stare. Not out of pity, but because I turned my story into something they couldn't unsee. This is how I became fireproof. And how their lies turned into my legacy. We didn't eat dinner like a family. We performed it. My father at the head of the table, eyes dull from work and something darker. My stepmother, June, seated like royalty with her lips painted too red for a Tuesday. And Logan, her precious Sonite years old and already a tyrant in a Minecraft t-shirt. I moved around them quietly, like a ghost with a to-do list. Set the table, warm the roast. Ice in Logan's cup. Fold the napkins diagonally, just the way June liked them. That night was hotter than usual, Kentucky humidity clinging to the ceiling. I'd spent the afternoon wiping grime from the baseboards, trying to earn peace in advance. But in this house, peace wasn't something you earned. It was something you were punished for expecting. "Juice?" Logan said without looking at me. I poured it. He slurped it, then dropped his spoon to the floor. "Oops," he smirked. I knelt to pick it up. My knees hit linoleum, my stomach clenched, my back ached. Still, no one said a word. When I tried to sit down just for a second, my stepmother's voice sliced through the air like a slap. "He eats first," she snapped. "Then you clean up. He's the prince. You know your place." I froze. I was 17, hungry, tired, just trying to stay invisible. But something in me cracked. "I'm not his maid," I said softly. "He's got arms. He can serve himself." The silence that followed was the kind that grows teeth. My father, who hadn't looked up from his plate all evening, moved. He reached for his belt with the kind of slowness that makes your lungs stop working. The sound of leather leaving loops is something you never forget. It sounds like betrayal, like a countdown. "Say it again," he warned, stepping toward me. I didn't. But my silence wasn't submission. It was defiance, quiet and burning. The belt came down across my arm, again on my back. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Logan laughed. June didn't stop him, didn't flinch. She just walked over and grabbed my chin hard enough to dig crescent moons into my skin. "You feed him," she hissed, "or you get out. Worthless." And I don't know what snapped first, my shoulder or my loyalty. I stumbled backward. My hands trembled. My heart didn't race, it shut down. "I'm done," I whispered. No one reacted. I walked to the door, barefoot, grabbed my wallet. Empty. Checked my hoodie. $1 bill. Crumpled. Tired. Like me. "Where's your toothbrush?" I asked, barely audible. June didn't answer. She slammed the door in my face. And just like that, I was no longer a daughter. No longer anyone. Just a girl with a limp arm, $1 in her pocket, and no one looking back. But in that exact moment, as the porch light flickered overhead, something else ignited. They thought they'd erased me. What they really did was set me free. The sidewalk felt sharper than I remembered. I don't know how far I walked, half a mile, maybe more, before the streetlights started to blur. I held my right arm close to my body, tucked into my hoodie like it might stop throbbing if I just hit it well enough. No shoes, no plan. Just pain and silence. The houses got smaller, the lawns untrimmed. A liquor store sat shuttered under a busted neon sign. I slid under its awning and sat on the cold concrete. My sleep shirt clung to my back, damp with sweat and fear. A car passed. I flinched. Headlights lit me up for one long second, then vanished. I felt exposed, like someone had unzipped my skin and left it open to the world. I pulled my knees to my chest. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since that morning burnt toast that Logan didn't want. I remembered watching my stepmother scrape it off his plate and shove it into my mouth like she was feeding a dog. It tasted like shame. Footsteps. I sat up straight. 4 silhouettes teenagers rounded the corner, laughing too loud, moving too fast. I looked down, tried to disappear. One of them noticed. "Yo," he called. "Is that a movie? Or are you really sleeping on a sidewalk?" Another voice. "You want a drink, Cinderella?" Before I could answer, something cold and fizzy hit my chest. Flat soda. It dripped down my collarbone like acid. My body jerked backward from the shock, and pain flared in my shoulder so fast I saw stars. They ran. I stayed. Sticky, cold, humiliated. I didn't cry, I didn't yell. I just wiped the liquid with my sleeve and pressed my hand to the concrete like it might steady me. It didn't. So I walked. Downtown Lexington after midnight doesn't make space for mercy. The storefronts stared back at me like judgmental ghosts. A boarded-up diner, a cracked window filled with dead plants. Even the churches were dark. Finally, I found a gas station with its fluorescent lights buzzing like angry flies. I stepped inside. The cashier didn't look up. "Bathrooms are for paying customers," he said. I reached into my hoodie and pulled out the crumpled dollar. "I have this." He looked up at last. "That'll get you a bottle of water, back wall." I nodded, tried to smile. He didn't smile back. I walked past rows of chips, candy, things I couldn't afford. The water bottles were lined up like little soldiers behind the glass. I picked the smallest one, 89 cents. "No bag," I whispered. "Didn't offer one," he replied. Outside, I found the bathroom tucked behind the station. A cracked mirror, a sink stained orange. I looked up. My reflection made me wince. Eye swollen, bruise on my cheekbone blooming like something unholy, dried blood near my temple. I touched the glass, tracing the outline of my face. "This is what worthless looks like to them," I said aloud. But as I turned to leave, I paused. I wasn't worthless. I was wounded. There's a difference. Across the street was a bench beneath a street lamp. The light flickered once, then steadied. I sat, back against the pole, water bottle in my lap, bruised hands in my hoodie pockets. I didn't have a name that mattered to anyone tonight. No address, no toothbrush, no one checking in. But I was still here. And somehow, that felt like the first act of rebellion. By morning, my arm had gone stiff. The bruising had turned a sick yellow-green, blooming like algae beneath my skin. A woman at the shelter had found me curled on the bench outside the community clinic and brought me in before sunrise. She didn't ask questions. Just wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and handed me a paper cup of something warm and bitter. I don't remember her name, but I remember what she said. "Don't apologize. Broken things still have edges. You're allowed to take up space." They assigned me a cot in a temporary room-bare mattress, plastic chair, one drawer, but it had a lock. And it wasn't my father's house. That alone made it feel holy. 3 days passed. Quiet. Careful. Then the staff called me in. A social worker named Mara sat behind a plastic desk with a thin manila folder. My name was written in blue ink across the tab, Avery Lynn Harper. She folded her hands. "Avery, I want to be transparent with you." "That's never a good start." "We received a report," she said gently, "from your stepmother and father." I didn't move. "They claim you became aggressive, that you threatened their younger child Logan with a knife, that you've had emotional outbursts, been suspended from school, that you're unstable." I blinked. "They said that?" She nodded. Her voice was soft, but her posture stayed braced, like she expected me to flip the desk or run. I didn't do either. I laughed. Just once. Sharp, bitter. "I had one episode," I said. "It was called saying no. Apparently that's illegal in their house." Mara didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. She slid a printed document across the table. "Here's the report." I scanned it. There it was. My father's name. My stepmother's signature, neat and precise like she was baking cookies instead of committing perjury. They wrote that I'd fled the home in a manic state, that I'd exhibited delusional behavior, and was potentially a threat to minors. My mouth went dry. Nowhere did it mention the bruises. Nowhere did it say my arm had gone partially numb from the belt. Nowhere did it record the soda poured down my shirt, the blood I'd tasted that night on the concrete, the hunger that clawed through my stomach like fire. They'd erased me. Not just emotionally. Not just physically. On paper. I looked up. "Can I keep this?" Mara hesitated, then nodded. I folded the document slowly, like it might bite, pressed it into the pocket of my thrifted jacket. They want me to disappear, I whispered. No, she said gently. They want you discredited. That way, if you speak, no one listens. I sat back in the chair. It creaked beneath me. So I have to prove I'm sane now, before I even get to prove I was hurt? I'm sorry, she said. But yes. The weight of that landed on my spine like another blow. But somewhere in the rubble of that moment, I remembered something. A line from a girl I once knew in 10th grade. Nishira. You better write your own story, Avery, or they'll write it for you, and then you're stuck living their version. That night, I found a public library 2 blocks away. Asked for a guest login. Sat at a flickering terminal near the copier. And began to type. This is how you erase a daughter. The keyboard stuck on the letter E. Every third tap, I had to slam it down like it owed me money. But that terminal dusty, blinking, shoved into the far corner of the Lexington Public Library became my witness stand. This is how you erase a daughter, I typed again. And then I kept going. I wrote everything. The spoon on the floor. The leather belt. The soda on my skin. June's voice saying, he's the prince. You? Clean for him. I described the dollar in my hoodie pocket like it was sacred. The cracked mirror in the gas station bathroom. The bruises that didn't fade but changed colors like warning lights. I wasn't poetic. I wasn't trying to be brave. I just told the truth. 3 hours passed. I didn't move. At one point, the librarian brought me a tissue and a half smile. She didn't ask. She just placed it gently next to the keyboard and walked away. I titled the post, $1 Daughter. And I hit publish. I didn't expect anything. Not really. Maybe some quiet internet corner would hold it for me, like a jar on a shelf. But the internet has a way of listening when you stop whispering. By morning, it had 17, 0 views. By evening, 200, 0. Someone on a local women's rights page had shared it. Then a community college instructor. Then a youth shelter director. By the second day, my phone buzzed with messages from reporters I'd never met, teachers I'd never had, and strangers who'd written things like, this happened to me too. I thought I was the only one. I'm a social worker. I believe you. You're not erased. You're unforgettable. I was stunned. I didn't even own a working phone. I read those messages through borrowed screens and overheard printouts at the shelter. June must have seen it too. Because on day 3, a cease and desist letter arrived. Typed, stamped, signed by an attorney I'd never heard of. It read, cease publication of defamatory content regarding the Harper family. Delete all statements or face legal consequences. I stared at the envelope. It smelled like perfume and fear. I brought it to Mara. She read it once, slowly, then again, faster. She looked up. You told the truth? Yes. You have hospital records, witness accounts, shelter logs. Yes. Then let them try. That night, the shelter hosted a small support circle. I didn't speak, but I listened. At one point, a girl named Layla turned to me and said, you lit a fire with that story. We've all been waiting for someone to strike the match. I didn't know how to answer. So I didn't. I just sat in that circle, surrounded by girls who had once been voiceless, watching the tiny flame I'd lit spread through all of us. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't attention. It was truth, and truth, when you speak it loud enough, doesn't ask for permission. It sets the house on fire. And maybe, just maybe, it makes space for something better to rise from the ash. It started with a voicemail. I was sitting near the vending machine at the shelter, staring at a bag of pretzels I couldn't afford, when Mara handed me a donated phone. No camera. Limited data, she said. But it works. On the cracked screen, 1 missed call. Unknown number. 1 voicemail. I tapped play. A woman's voice came through measured, warm, low, like a cello string. Avery. My name is Dr. Camille Rhodes. I teach at Lexington State and run a support program for students aging out of the foster system or finding their way through. I read your piece, twice. I'd like to talk. I didn't move. I listened again. Then again. I didn't know why her voice made me cry. Maybe it was that she didn't say victim. She said student. Like she saw something past the bruises, past the shelter, past the belt. Like she saw me. That night, I borrowed Mara's office to call her back. She answered on the first ring. "Dr. Rhodes?" I asked. "You must be Avery." She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask me to retell everything. She just said, "I believe you, and if you're willing, I'd like to help." I didn't know how to answer. So I said the only honest thing I had left. "No one's ever offered that without strings." "There are no strings," she said, "but there is a path, if you want it." She told me about a scholarship, emergency housing for vulnerable students, a mentorship program, and her voice gentler, now a law clinic. "We have legal interns who help young women navigate what you're up against. If you want your records cleared, your name back, your story protected, we can help build that case." I felt something shift in my chest. Not hope yet, but the possibility of it. "You really read the whole piece?" I asked. "Every word," she said. "You write like someone who's had everything taken and still found a way to make beauty out of what was left." I didn't know what to say, so I whispered, "I'm not sure I'm ready." She replied, "That's okay. Readiness isn't required, just willingness." 3 days later, I stood outside her office. Brick building, 3rd floor, small plaque on the door that read, "Dr. Camille Rhodes, Sociology, Survivor Advocacy." When she opened the door, she looked nothing like I imagined. Jeans, coffee-stained sweater, no makeup, laugh lines deep as rivers. "You're taller than I thought," she said with a smile. I sat down in a leather chair that didn't quite stop squeaking. She handed me tea in a mug that said, "Truth is never the enemy." We didn't talk about my stepmother. We talked about writing, about memory, about how silence becomes its own kind of scar. I told her about the soda, the bruises, the file. She said one sentence I'll never forget. "You were never unstable, you were just unprotected." I nodded. Then I cried harder than I had since the night I left. By the end of that week, I had something I hadn't had in years. A student ID, a class schedule, a key to a dorm room, a nameplate on a mailbox, a beginning. I still slept with the light on, still flinched at loud doors, but I also had a place to put my books, a lock that only I controlled, a campus that didn't know me as the girl who ran. And somewhere deep in the law clinic basement, 2 interns with serious faces and open hearts began building a file titled Avery Harper v. False Reporting, Coercive Abuse, and Defamation. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was the beginning of reclamation. It happened in the frozen food aisle. I wasn't dressed for anything dramatic. Faded hoodie, backpack slung over one shoulder, and a pack of instant dumplings in my hand. I was halfway through finals week, sleep-deprived and living off vending machine coffee. Then I heard his voice. "June, grab the broccolino, the one with the seal." I froze. That voice. That same tone that used to crack the air before the belt did. I turned my head slowly. And there they were. My father in his work boots, still chewing on a toothpick like it made him important. June in a fitted coat, still perfectly ironed, scanning the shelves like the world owed her a favor. And behind them, pushing the cart with one hand and holding a phone with the other, Logan. The so-called prince. They didn't see meat first. But I didn't duck. I didn't flinch. I stepped forward, let the cartwheels squeak under my boots. I didn't mean to make eye contact, but I did. June's head jerked first. Her face twisted not with guilt, not with fear, but with confusion, like her reflection had just stepped out of the mirror and slapped her. Then my father turned. And for the first time in my life, he froze. Not because he'd been caught, but because I wasn't broken. I stood there, dumplings in hand, backpack over one shoulder, eyes steady. He blinked once. Then again, I could see it, the calculation behind his eyes. She looks okay. She's not limping, not hiding. She's clean, standing tall, wearing boots I didn't buy. I tilted my head. Just a fraction. No words. June opened her mouth, closed it. Her hand gripped Logan's shoulder like a warning. And in that moment, it hit me. They were afraid. Not of what I'd say, but of what I'd become without them. I didn't speak. Not a word. Because the girl they beat had always been too loud, too opinionated, too difficult. But this version of me, she didn't need noise. She was visible, whole, untouched by their denial. June looked around, maybe searching for a witness, maybe hoping I'd just vanish into the freezer fog. Instead, I stepped past them, right between the frozen corn and family-size lasagna. My shoulder brushed Logan's arm. He didn't flinch, but he looked up, just for a second. And I saw it, the flash of recognition, the small voice inside him asking, "Why did she leave? Why didn't I stop it?" I didn't hate him. He was a boy raised in a castle of rot. I just hoped he'd tear down the walls before they locked him in, too. I made it to checkout. Quiet, calm. And when I looked up from the card reader, they were gone. But something deeper had arrived. A shift I hadn't expected. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was standing in the middle of the life they swore I couldn't build without them. Not with revenge, not with violence, but with presence. I existed. That alone shook their world. That night, I wrote a short post. Saw them today. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. Sometimes your healing is loud enough to silence the people who tried to bury you. It got over 900, 0 shares. Not because I named names. Not because I screamed. But because every person who's ever walked away from pain knows this. There's nothing more powerful than being seen again. On your own terms. In your own voice. And in clothes no one picked for you. The courthouse smelled like old coffee and fear. Not mine. Theirs. June sat 2 rows ahead, perfectly manicured fingers folded tight in her lap. My father was beside her, jaw clenched, tapping his knee like it owed him something. Their lawyer wore a navy suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. And me? I wore a gray blazer I borrowed from Dr. Rhodes. My hair pulled back. Shoes shined. Back straight. The bailiff called my name. Avery Lynn Harper. My name. Not the one they tried to smear. Not the one they stripped of records and twisted with whispers. Mine. I stepped forward. The judge, an older woman with clear eyes and a sharper mind, nodded once. "Miss Harper, you may begin." I reached into my folder and pulled out a piece of paper creased, soft at the corners. I had folded and unfolded it so many times, it nearly tore. It was a printout of the hospital report from the night I ran. Bruising on lower back. Laceration near shoulder. Contusions on both arms. Patient arrived alone. No family present. I passed it to the clerk without a word. Then I took a breath. And I told my story. Not all of it. Not every scream or slap or chore screamed through clenched teeth. Just the truth. Your Honor, I was told I didn't matter, that I was difficult, that serving my stepbrother made me useful. I was told I was unstable because I asked for help. But what I was alone, and what they wear was comfortable in that silence. Their lawyer objected. The judge overruled. I continued. I left with $1 in my pocket and bruises no one could see unless they looked close. I went to a shelter. I wrote my story. I didn't name them. I didn't want revenge. I wanted freedom, and a name that couldn't be erased. This case isn't about defamation, it's about discomfort. They are uncomfortable with the fact that I survived louder than they expected. June shifted. Her face was flushed now. My father looked like he wanted to vanish into his chair. Good. Because I hadn't burned them. I'd simply walked out of the fire with evidence in my hand. Then came the defense. They called me volatile. They pointed to one emergency room visit from years ago unrelated. They used words like unstable, emotionally manipulative, selfish. They tried to make me small again. But I didn't flinch. Because across the aisle sat 2 law students who had built this case from the ground up. Because in the front row sat Dr. Rhodes, arms crossed, eyes locked on the judge like a silent anchor. Because I had the truth, and the truth doesn't apologize for making people squirm. After final statements, the judge recessed. 30 minutes of silence. When she returned, the courtroom held its breath. She didn't look at June. Or my father. She looked at me. "Miss Harper," she said, "you've presented your case with clarity, consistency, and documented evidence. It is the judgment of this court that your account is credible, and the attempted silencing of your voice through legal intimidation is not only inappropriate, is unjust." She banged the gavel once. Case dismissed. Protective order filed. Name cleared. And in that moment, I didn't cry. I stood. I nodded. And I walked out. Outside, the sky was a brutal blue. Unapologetic. Clear. Open. Dr. Rhodes caught up to me. You okay? I nodded again, slower this time. I think I'm free. She smiled. No, sweetheart, you've been free. Today, they just found out. It was small. A studio apartment over a flower shop, with creaky floors and a window that caught the sunset just right. The bed was secondhand, the shelves uneven, and the key still stiff in the lock. But on the mailbox downstairs, taped in careful handwriting, was one simple line. Avery Lynn Harper. No middleman, no C.O. shelter, no case number. Just my name. I stood in the doorway for a while. Bag on one shoulder. Hands full of groceries. Heart full of things I didn't know how to name. The silence didn't scare me anymore. I put the groceries down, lit a cheap vanilla candle, and unfolded a piece of paper I'd kept all this timey hospital report. I slipped it into a drawer, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't need to carry it on my chest anymore. I had carried the truth, spoken it, stood by it, and it had set me free. Later that night, I sat at my little desk and opened my laptop, typed 6 words into a blank document. This is how you reclaim yourself. And then I kept writing. Not to prove, not to fight, but because I could. Because no one else would ever own my voice again. And for the first time, I felt it fully, quietly, deeply. Home,